we think the future of crypto is definitely user generated. We haven't even created, 1% of the tokens that, will exist in the next 10, 15 years.
Hey everybody, Tanner here with WAGMI Ventures. On today's episode, we have Bradley Miles, co-founder and CEO at Roll. For anyone who's new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting founders from across Web3. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. But for now, let's get into it with Bradley from Roll. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm here today with Bradley Miles, co-founder and CEO at Roll. Bradley, how's it going today?
Hey, Tanner. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. We were chatting a little bit right before this. It sounds like you just got back from a really great trip.
For sure. Yeah. Just got back from the Grand Canyon. Amazing time.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm really excited to chat today. And I'd like to start maybe just by learning a little bit more about what you were up to prior to launching Roll. Can you give a quick snapshot of your story just here to kind of introduce yourself?
Yeah, worked in VC very briefly, more growth equity than early stage. Was asked to just really dive into, at the time, Bitcoin. This is around 2015. All roads led to one site called CoinDesk. So I pinged CoinDesk and they were 4 people. I said, can I be your head of research and just jam out research reports? They said yes. And so I became the 5th hire at CoinDesk. I worked under Ryan Selkis and Barry Silbert at the time. And my job was just pounding out hundreds of pages of research every quarter. And I called it the State of Blockchain report. So if you Google State of Blockchain, Bradley Miles, you'll see some very old reports on the Ethereum hard fork and early Bitcoin reports. But really fell in love with the space and saw that there's going to be a world in which digital communities create digital currency. This became pretty obvious to me in like 2015, 2016. And so the question was really just how to get involved. Like conceptually, as that paradigm happens, do you want to be a platform that services those currencies? Or do you want to take a super long shot opportunity and try to be the PayPal, Stripe of this world and really serve all the platforms that serve the currencies? This is sort of premise for how and why we started Roll. And so from there, left CoinDesk and became an EIR and just started the journey as a founder and founded Roll.
Very cool. Okay. So, before we jump into talking about all the cool stuff happening at Roll, could you tell me a little bit more about how maybe working in VC helped your ability to get to conviction on launching Roll? I know that was prior to CoinDesk, but I'm curious if there were any skills from that made the opportunity space you saw at Roll particularly just stand out as especially interesting.
Yeah, of course. Funny you should ask. I actually wrote a book on my time in VC. So a lot of the students read it. Some of my investors have read it, actually. It's kind of how they know about me. I'll drop it in this chat here if you want to share it in the show notes. It's called Break into VC. And it's really just gets you from someone that is basically of the mindset that they want to get into venture capital all the way to like you'll be able to analyze companies by the end of the book. There's really no book like this. So I wrote it and became a bestseller. Right up there with like Brad Feld's Venture Deals and all these books. And so This was actually like a huge signal for me. I'd actually really recommend now, starting a podcast as well as, writing a book. So these were just huge signals that allowed me to like stand out and get some interesting opportunities. But yeah, in venture particularly, you just really learn how to analyze companies, and the knowledge compounds really quickly. So you could imagine talking to 10 drone founders, and then without working in the drone industry, you become super knowledgeable on the field. So it only took me, 5 or 10 calls with blockchain CEOs to really understand, like 2015, 2016, to really understand that, this is a pretty massive opportunity ahead of us.
Definitely, yeah. So let's jump into Roll. Maybe first, can you tell us a little bit about what Roll's creating in your own words?
Yeah, for sure. How I like to do this is always kind of rewind back to, let's say, the 1980s. Where there's like 3 channels in the US, CBS, ABC, and NBC. And it would be insane to create your own channel back then. There was no infrastructure to do so. And that's not true now. 40 years later, anyone, anywhere, anytime can create their own channel. Now there's, instead of 3 channels, there's 30 million channels with things like Spotify, YouTube, etc. Roll is doing this same paradigm shift with money, with currency. So we're allowing anyone, anywhere, anytime to create their own money. And so we call this type of asset social token, and we've minted social tokens for several hundred different digital communities. And we're about to beta release our API infrastructure that allows other platforms to not only integrate any digital currency, so any ERC20 token, but also mint tokens and have them be natively experienced in platforms. So we're starting with social platforms there, sort of a PayPal for fungible tokens. And we're pretty excited about the road ahead.
Very cool. Okay, so Roll has been around since about 2017, right? And so, the industry's changed so much since then. I'm curious, can you talk about how Roll has evolved as the space has evolved? And maybe even kind of just focusing on this past year, what have some of those adaptations looked like?
Yeah, we launched in 2019, basically at the same time Uniswap launched, Uniswap V1. And so we had an idea that tokens that are just created, that we can create can have value, but it was pretty abstract. Once Uniswap V1 came on the scene, it was very apparent that we could basically fork their front end and start, using their protocol to generate liquidity and, market value for tokens. So that was pretty fascinating. And then fast forward to today, there's many creators and tokens that have markets on Roll and outside of Roll. And we've really seen the space evolve to a point where there's been waves of innovation, which is fantastic. Roll initially had this dilemma of, do we want to try and be a PayPal or an eBay? And so, we've chosen to be infrastructure, which is really great because we could power platforms that can integrate tokens at scale and do those things specifically. And so we'd really consider Roll sort of a Web 2.5 company. We're kind of, right in between Web 2 and Web 3. We like to say, Web 2 platforms. So we're looking at Discord right now. We can create sort of Web 2.5 extensions to them and allow communities all over Discord or any other application to just start natively using tokens. I'll actually send you some tokens here in the Zencaster thread.
Cool.
So right now I'm sending you, for the listeners, one Doom. So this is the social token of X Copy, super big NFT creator. This may be like giving you one Warhol back in the day. Let's see, and I'll send you also, let's see, what should I send you? So I'll send you one whale from Whale Shark, who's a massive NFT collector in the space, famous for creating the Whale Vault. So these two are both Roll creators, and we're super excited about the markets that they're building. And so the way this works is why we say Web 2.5 is, when we integrate with platforms, they don't necessarily need to set up a non-custodial wallet to integrate ERC20 tokens. So by clicking a link and signing up, similar to Coinbase or any sort of social app, you could immediately get tokens. So we're very interested in sort of the mass integration of fungible tokens, starting with Ethereum and ERC20 tokens. So these same features that I just showed you, this idea of sending tokens is going to be natively integrated into platforms, and we'll also integrate tokens we didn't mint. So for us, we have a pretty antithetical view. So we think anything's a social token. We think Bitcoin's a social token, USDC is a social token. The market just hasn't seen those types of assets have those features, but those are things we'll enable in sort of the coming months and years.
Love it. That's super interesting, and I'm excited to. I'm seeing these links here. I'm excited to claim these tokens. So I'm curious. You've touched on a couple things, but I'm curious if you had to talk about what are the most interesting or unique use cases you've seen with creator community social tokens, where, this might even be a sub question of a bigger question too, which is like, what's got you personally most excited at Roll these days?
Yeah, for sure. So what's really exciting is just the wealth of entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. So there's people that want to create, Web3 streaming platforms, or Web3 chat platforms or any sorts of these things. And so when Roll integrates a token into the network, we're very easily able to, integrate it into those applications. So, if you're if you have a podcast and you want to create a token, not only, when it's integrated into the Roll network, it could then get integrated into podcast apps. And this allows the creation of entirely new categories. You can call this listen to earn. Roll can integrate into a metaverse and, geolocate where you are and give you rewards for hanging out there. So you can create sort of a live to earn or party to earn scenario. So these types of new categories that, we see as valuable in the long term, we're really excited about, sort of growing. And we also have some Web3 infrastructure as well. So we have a staking interface, which is super cool because we have a unique circumstance where, Roll doesn't just have one token. At scale, Roll will have millions of tokens. One of our investors kind of said, we'll actually have like the most shots on goal on currency, because as Roll scales, people will just keep on minting tokens. And so in this fashion, we're pretty excited to just see the landscape evolve and see different types of tokens form using our infrastructure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm curious about, another category here where, there's things you're excited about, and then there's things that maybe came up along the journey that were sort of surprises. And I'm curious, what have been some of those key surprises along the journey thus far? And really, how did your team think about and adapt to those surprises?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say mainly how many chains kind of emerged. We really saw when we started, Ethereum was kind of the only game in town. And that's kind of how we thought things were going to play out. But it's truly become a multi-chain world. And so the thesis for Roll has really changed from launching social tokens, which we now see as like a sliver of what we do. It's almost like a tiny inlet in like a massive river, to really integrating any token on any chain into any platform. So we're starting with ERC20 tokens and social platforms. So from Roll, you could expect something like a Discord bot soon, where you could basically, tip or airdrop any token in the Roll network. And, we're probably going to integrate every ERC20 on Ethereum and Polygon first. So this idea of being a multi-chain world is really interesting. And, we're super excited about all the chains that are popping up and how we can get involved, whether they're EVM or non-EVM.
Yeah, super interesting. So you guys have a membership component too, is that right? I'd love to learn more a little bit about what that piece looks like in addition to the social tokens component.
Yeah, so we're super excited about, it's almost like antithetical Web 2.5 aspect where, your niece or cousin can claim some of those links I sent you, or, get a token in Discord or Telegram or Twitter or kind of whatever Roll plugs into. But there's also the very real Web3 component. And so there's problems that we kind of need to think about and solve over time. So like, how does a token get liquidity? How does a token develop a treasury? And so there's been just super interesting things happening in both aspects. So I'll talk about two things right now. So our staking contract and our membership contract. So one thing that's super interesting is just the rise of meme coins. So as I speak right now, there is a meme coin called Pooh, named after Winnie the Pooh here. And it has used our staking contracts to generate a few $1 million in liquidity. And so our staking contracts are almost like, you can almost think about it as being on the other side of Chipotle. So just, allowing you to create your own burrito or bowl and kind of serve people. So you can create your own staking contract and be like, okay, I'm going to, has a Tanner ETH LP token. I'm going to put 1 million Tanners into here, and you guys can earn Tanners for contributing liquidity. And so, there's now been several meme coins that have really just found us through massive Googling or chat GPTing and have just permissionlessly set up staking contracts. And so this is a world we're very excited about, where people that haven't minted tokens on Roll come to Roll, learn about our infrastructure, and kind of grow from there. And so liquidity mining as a product is something that we're excited about. That's what staking. But, what if you just want to generate, liquidity for your treasury? So not on an exchange, you just want it in your Gnosis multisig or something like that. And so that's the memberships protocol. And so we wanted to make a utility-driven, fungible token-specific membership. So it's arranged something like Patreon. And so what it allows you to do is basically say, hey, I'm Tanner. I have the WAGMI podcast. If you want to be a gold member, it's going to cost 1,000 Tanners. And, you're pricing each Tanner in the utility-driven way to become sort of a gold member for 1,000 Tanners. Say, you price it at some denomination of ETH. I pay ETH, I get Tanners, and I also get all of the token-gated utility that happens as a result. So people tend to use, Discord or sort of Telegram or any number of applications for events or chat to sort of create rewards. So it's almost a primitive for like a Web3 Patreon. And we'll be wrapping that up in an SDK pretty soon. So out of the box, any given platform can, 1, mint tokens, 2, create staking contracts for their communities, and 3, generate liquidity for DAOs and communities using memberships.
Love it. I can really get a picture of like all the different permutations of possibilities here where it's really, really cool. Okay, so a question that's become kind of a recurring question on this podcast, where if I were to say the future of crypto is blank, how would you fill in the blank? we've discussed a little bit where role is going, and I'm curious how it connects to where you see crypto going as well.
Yeah, I think the future of crypto is user generated. So we're going to expand far beyond tokens created by, I think, what people would understand as creators. So when Roll integrates something like Bitcoin or Matic or these sorts of things, the network becomes pretty massive as we grow, but our origins are in the creator economy. And so when we think about the creator economy, we think about this big bucket of user generated content. In it are things like likes and follows and retweets and things like that. But with a Web3 backend, we see user generated content transforming into this new thing that we call internally user generated capital. And user generated capital is the ability to have read and write access to capital, the ability to create different types of digital assets. And so at Roll, we see user generated capital kind of in two buckets, for sort of different types of goods or art or music. So that's NFTs, and more so capital for community, which we see as like fungible tokens. And so, we think the future of crypto is definitely user generated. We haven't even created, 1% of the tokens that, will exist in the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, Bradley, maybe two last questions here before we wrap up. I'm curious your advice for any founders building in the crypto and blockchain space right now. And maybe similarly, kind of any advice you would have imparted to yourself when you guys got started, knowing what you know now. What would you say to yourself at that point?
Yeah, I mean, definitely validate your idea before you come in. So, just talk to a bunch of founders, reach out to a bunch of folks. Now that I'm kind of in the founder community, everyone kind of knows everyone, and it's just so easy to chat. I didn't really know that. I just kind of stepped in and kind of made it up as I went along. But, in general, try to validate your idea with a bunch of founders that are just way further along and some that are a little ahead. Validate your product with users, do all the free stuff, right? So you should be very familiar with concepts like, MVP or jobs to be done, this idea that your product is serving the user in some way, the user's hiring your product to do something, find out exactly what that is. This is all free stuff. You can give someone $20, Amazon gift card or some ETH or something, have them sit down for an hour, really validate your product as best as you can with like $100 and some conversations on your time. And yeah, you'll be golden, because once you start down this road, you can't really jump off. Like once you're a founder, you're a founder. And so a lot of people can't wait to start a company, but my advice would be to wait. Wait and be patient and validate things. And then when you're ready to jump, then jump.
Love it. Okay, Bradley, what's your team working on right now, and what's the best way for people to follow along on the journey?
Yeah, so we're releasing our APIs soon. So our APIs will connect the Roll APIs, so the ways to really send tokens seamlessly to a lot of people, into Discord. And so we're actually working with the largest Discord bot on Discord. So it has several 100,000 users, and we're basically forking it, connecting it to our APIs, and creating a bot that could allow you to tip or airdrop any token in our network. So right now, that's several hundred different tokens from creators. Next quarter, it may be every ERC20 token. So you may be tipping Matic or airdropping Matic or Mana or sort of any of these things. From Discord, we'll go where the community wants us to go. So we'll probably think about other platforms that people use like Twitter and Telegram. But I'm personally the most excited to talk to other founders. So we just got a founder just reached out that is trying to recreate loyalty. And so he wants to focus on his loyalty app. He doesn't want to focus on the management of tokens or how brands and customers kind of, would receive tokens, or, what triggers that post-purchase experience. We would love to do that. So we love talking with founders that want to get to the next level and, power them in that way. We sort of see it, you almost envision that relationship as sort of like, a Stripe Shopify relationship. So we're really excited about being the back end, the token back end to some incredible founders that are going to release stuff in the next few quarters.
Love it. Bradley, thank you so much for the time. This is fascinating to get to learn more about what you guys are building, and I think it's pretty tremendous stuff. So I'm excited for the listeners to get to know you guys better through this, and have a great start to your week here.
Thanks, Tanner. This was great.
All right. Take care.